Hello, my name is João. Like was said, I'm a representative of Movimento Emprego. And what I'm going to try to expose here today is a small, brief, and very personal account of what it's been like to organize unemployed people in Lisbon to try and make it so that what is largely an unorganized, massive people to try to make us unemployed youth, but the unemployed at large, into a relevant political organization. I would like to thank, first of all, the organization for having invited me. I don't really feel like I'm necessarily worthy of being here because there'd be so many better and more effective groups. Firstly, so I feel quite inadequate being here in the first place next to so many distinguished people. And secondly, mostly because I have to have my presentation after Plataforma Ghetto, which is an extremely subversive political organization, and we like to think ourselves as being radical, but next to them I think we're almost like Boy Scouts. And so, you know, I think, just to have a quick word, I don't think that presentation really let you know how hard it is for them to live in the country, let alone to be politically organized. So I'm going to have to ask you to once again please applaud them, because he didn't really let you know how amazing their work is. So, if I may start, we're trying to organize unemployed people in Lisbon, and we're called Movimento Emprego, which roughly translates as the unemployed movement. And just a quick word about unemployment in Portugal. As you can see in this graph, and these are our calculations of the evolution of unemployment since 2001 to 2012. And as you can see, unemployment has actually been rising steadily since 2001. And it has risen drastically since 2010 in particular, and after the Memorandum of Understanding, which is right, 2011 is right here, as you can see, but already before there was a huge rise in unemployment. And essentially, it's just these two facts that I would like to have you consider, which is that unemployment is rising drastically, and at the same time, labor unions, which historically have represented a massive political force, they do not represent unemployed people adequately. And the reason why is because unemployed people do not have a salary. And they survive, in the case, for example, of the biggest labor union in Portugal, they survive by having a contribution of 1% of people's salary. And so basically, even though there is a claim that labor unions are this amazing, heroic movement for the representation of the working class, the fact is that their institutionalization and their logistical dependency on people's wages and the contribution that comes therefrom has meant that there's been a huge gap in representation. And if you understand this, and I think especially in Portugal, you will understand to a large extent what has led to a drastic emergence of social movements. This is quite a funny picture from, I think it's Coimbra, of people holding a banner saying, "Mom, I'm unemployed." And so I'd just like to speak a little bit about what it means to be unemployed, socially speaking. Being unemployed is usually a source of shame, poverty, a lot of frustration and social exclusion. However, it is an integral part of the economic system, and its growth is a part of the government attempt to raise productivity. So it's predictable in regards to the measures that are being applied, and it was not only predictable from an economic perspective, it was actually predicted in the Memorandum of Understanding. They said, and our calculations point to 26% of unemployed people in total. However, the government statistics, because they essentially lie and they manipulate numbers, they predict, I think now the number is at 16.9. And in 2011, they predicted that unemployment would rise to 16.7. So they were pretty close. And so it was not only predictable, it was predicted by them. But of course they don't say this on TV. They say, "Oh, well, we're really sorry, we'll try to do better next time," but this is a complete lie, and this is one of the things that we try to expose in the unemployment movement. And so the very way, for example, when we look at, I think it was an IMF or World Bank document that I came across, because I was looking up documents regarding unemployment, and I came across a document that spoke about structural unemployment. And I said, wow, I'm about to read a possibly subversive document about unemployment, because structural unemployment surely is going to tell me that unemployment is part of the very structure of our economy. And then I said, well, who who authored this document? And I saw either IMF or World Bank. I said, wow, this is a moment of clarity which they had here. And I opened the document, and what did they tell me? They tell me that in fact structural unemployment is due to a lack of adequate relation between people's skills and the skills that are needed in the economy. So this is just an example of how they try to shift the blame away from the system and onto the people. And they tell us it is us which are inadequate, we don't have the right skills, we're lazy, we don't want to work, we love unemployment benefits, we like living in our parents' house, and this is simply not true. And obviously the growth of unemployment is not only a strategy on the part of the government to raise what they call economic efficiency, which is essentially a very silly way of measuring it, because they will compare output to the amount of workers in the economy. And so all they have to do to raise productivity is to actually lower the working force, and in relation to what is being produced, because there won't be as much of a disparity. So they'll fire people and they will show the index and say, see, we're making it more competitive. But this is completely a nonsensical attempt to use indexes which are maladapted to economic analysis to try and essentially fool us. And obviously the result is exactly what they want, which is the lowering of wages and the erosion of workers' rights. And without the growth of the contingent of unemployed people, they would simply not be able to do this. And so this is an image which was made by one of our colleagues, Duarte Guerreiro, and I've called this Ready, Steady, Go Look for a Job, and it shows, I don't know if you can see it because it's quite dark, it shows two dogs, and I don't mean to represent us as dogs, but this is what they would have us be. Two dogs fighting over a €475 bill, which obviously doesn't exist, but it represents the minimum wage in Portugal, which is €475. I think they've actually managed to lower it since. And we tried to fight against that, and obviously didn't manage. There is an article in the Constitution, which is called the right to work. And it not only says that everyone has a right to work, but it says that the state, one of their things which they have to try to address is to try to ensure the right to work and to promote, here if you see 2A, the execution of policies looking for full employment. So all we're looking for is for the application of our constitutional rights and the policies which the Constitution mandates that the government should apply. This is not obviously what they're doing the exact opposite, unfortunately. So the MSC, Movimento Emprego, this is our logo. We started with a small meeting of young unemployed people wanting to get organized and intent on fighting back. And we are mostly young and we are fully radical, so I have to speed up because I actually spent a lot of time. So I would like to tell you a story. 4 members of the MSC were handing out leaflets in an employment center, and one of them was identified by the police on the spot for a reason we didn't understand. And that member will actually be tried soon for organizing an illegal protest for people handing out leaflets. And a PSP spokeswoman infamously stated that 2 people already make up a protest. And during Salazar's fascist regime, it took 3 people for a subversive meeting. And so what that lets me know is that maybe our generation is worth our weight a little bit more, because it only takes 2 of us and it took 3 of them, you know? But obviously that's a joke. I know that's not true. We're a lot less dangerous than my parents' generation. And so the unemployment centers is we call them unemployment centers. We try to fight against them because they actually just serve as a means to police unemployed people, and they have to present themselves periodically in order to continue to receive unemployment benefits. And its capacity to find work for unemployed people is minimal, not to say non-existent. And this is a representation of what I call the Vera Pereira system. The Vera Pereira system is very simple. This is a job advert from the actual government agency that tries to find work. And it's quite simple, what you need to get this job in terms of education, not relevant. It tells you the working hours, 9 to 13, and then you go back, you go to lunch, you come back, 14, 17, nothing wrong here. When you have a break, Saturday, Sunday, again, nothing wrong here. And then it says here in extra information, only except Vera Pereira. And that means that someone forgot to take this information, which is telling the people who work in the employment center to only consider one person called Vera Pereira. So maybe if we all change our names to Vera Pereira, the unemployment problem would disappear, who knows? I would also like to talk about, in an as little cynical manner as possible, but this is quite important, which is the reactivation of MTD, which is the Movimento de Trabalhadores Desempregados, by the CGTP. And we are almost 1 year old, so we will have been formed in February of 2012. And in the 1st of August of 2012, CGTP had a brilliant idea of reactivating their, what I call a CGTP sleeper cell, trying to organize unemployed people, and this is very much a direct response to what we have been doing, and so we're very happy. And I've included this here because it demonstrates what us and the social movements actually do. I think we are worth not only what we do with our hands, but we are worth what we make other people do, because we push them to radicalize their speech, and we push them to radicalize their action. And we are quite happy and satisfied to fulfill this role. And we have certainly been doing that in regards to labor unions. I'm going to skip this because I'm running out of time. And we have, I think, some successes. We're one of the only social movements in Portugal which publish our accounts publicly. And we've been listed by a member of the right-wing party, the Social Democrats, which are in power, Pacheco Pereira, who's supposedly the man in the know about the left wing. And he listed us as being part of the violent left wing, which is not true because we're not actually violent at all. But in the current political climate, we consider slander and pressure as the equivalent to an official recognition of a job well done. So we'd like to thank Pacheco Pereira here, if he's listening. We really appreciate your work. And we have a highly consistent presence on the streets. And we are not many, and I'm going to discuss this, but we are quite loud, and we usually make our presence felt. And obviously we try to deconstruct a lot of government propaganda. This is something which we have on our site, because we have an unemployed mathematician, and it's our attempt to calculate the money that is not being produced by having loads of unemployed people. We try to organize a protest, and this is when we go into more self-critical part. It was actually extremely hard to organize a protest just of unemployed people, and I like to think that it was mostly a failure, because we covered Lisbon with these banners, but we only managed to get about 400 to 500 people. And so this has certainly shifted a little bit. This is some pictures of us on the streets. And this is also a part of self-criticism, because I think we spend a lot of time just trying to get people on the streets. And this is a lot of what we do, just have a street presence. Just some pictures which I'm going to skip. We also organized an event which we call the Siege, which was boycotted by some social movements which are actually completely controlled by political parties, and it was certainly boycotted by CGTP, but it didn't work because it was actually quite nice. And unfortunately it marked a transition, because it was the second installment of violence near the parliament, which we don't appreciate at all. But it's unfortunately it's what happened. And so, seeing as we have had such amount of trouble organizing unemployed people, we've had to adopt a strategy of trying to have solidarity with the working people, because we know that unemployed people, we have to work with working people, because our struggle is one and the same. And one of the groups which we try to act as a link, which is the dock workers, which are extremely combative and not aligned. And so we organized a protest which unfortunately descended into a lot of violence. And it's quite interesting. I'm going to skip this. Unfortunately, it was a very violent protest. And the police brutality was quite large during that protest, and it's quite interesting to see that the Minister of Interior, the first thing that he mentioned on the TV, because CGTP organized a protest that converged onto the same place, but they left earlier, let's say, and so the first thing the Minister of Interior said is, guys, please accept that the violence was not to blame on CGTP, it was the other guys, and they took a different path. So obviously it's quite interesting to see a right-wing government actually actively defending a labor union which is controlled by supposedly radical left-wing communists, which is quite telling, you know. And so in the short time that we've been active, we've been marked with some deal of success, but I think mainly there's a lot of room for improvement, and I see a lot of the things that we try to do as basically a failure. I think we failed to reach the peripheral working classes, and so we have a lot of members which belong to the middle class who live inside the city, but we've really struggled, and as other people have mentioned before, most people in Lisbon live on the periphery, and the spatial dynamics is very important in Portugal, but I have no time to go into it. So I have some hypotheses of why we've been struggling to actually directly recruit, and I'm not afraid to use this word, recruit unemployed people. And I think it's because of the very word unemployment has negative connotations, and many people do not want to be associated with it. I think that's one of the reasons. And there's also been widespread demobilization and political demotivation, and this demotivation is particularly strong among unemployed people. And so the future prospects is very much in line with worker resistance. We're going to try to organize a day of resistance, which follows the pattern of worker solidarity. And to organize the urban unemployed in their condition of urban unemployed, I think will be one of the keys for upgrading and radicalizing the social urban struggles of the 21st century. But thus far, we have been somewhat unsuccessful, but we're working on it. And if you have ideas to send us of how we could do it, we're very open in trying to consider them. And here are contact details, and I would like to thank you